welcome everybody, and great to be here on the panel. Fleur, just want to say thank you for presenting your perspective from out of Unilever and giving the audience a chance also to know a little bit more about you and your interests. Marguerite, can you introduce yourself briefly? There should be microphones coming. Can you introduce yourself and share why this topic resonates?
Is this working?
It doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, it's
There we
working,
go.
exactly. Good morning. I was actually at the wrong hotel, so that was a nice start of my day. And I actually live in The Hague, so I drove into the wrong direction, having to turn back. So, but I made it, so that's the good news. So, my background is I have actually two roles. So I have a statutory role, which Mary Jane already related to, which is chairman of the executive board of Aon Holdings. Aon being the insurance broker, we have 60,000 people working in 120 countries. And our statutory environment is channeled through the Netherlands. And I'm chairman of that board, so I consolidate 7 billion of our 10 billion revenue. Next to that, I also have a very operational role. So I'm not only being a board member, I also am Global Chief Marketing Officer of the Management Consultancy and Data Analytics Unit. So I really like Fleur showing data. So we need to make sure that all the discussions are more fact-based. And that's my perspective on the whole. You asked me for my perspective. I'd really like to ensure that all of our discussions are getting a little bit more fact-based and also a little bit more action-based. And I'll talk about this later. Thank you.
Okay. Marguerite, before you pass to Shaila, can you just share something personal about why this topic is so important to you?
I've actually, lately, after last week, I was in Monte Carlo for a reinsurance conference, nice location. And I encountered a lot of my old friends, and I actually started in insurance and reinsurance. And a lot of people who I've known for years, and my career has gone to a different side of the business, not reinsurance, but insurance nowadays. They all came back to me, and actually 3 people related back to this story, that when I was asked, when I was very young, when I started in 1990, and I'm still very young, of course, like all we are, when I started, I said always, what do you want to achieve? And I always gave one answer, the top. And funnily enough, I don't even recall that I said this, but it's something which is so an incremental part of my DNA. Whatever I do, I would like to, try to do it as good as I can. And I think that's also one of the elements of women. We always try to do everything what we do as good as we can if we're ambitious. And so what's my story here? The funny part, it's so incremental part of my life and DNA that those stories, when people related back to them, I was really listening, okay, funny. And they really had to laugh. Because at those days, it wasn't even, they thought, okay, she's bold. She dares to say that. But I said it even in my performance review, like, what do you want to achieve? So the top. And so, anyhow, so that's my little story. And I haven't changed, I still want to reach the top. And I married a pilot, so I'm doing well in the sky.
Thank you. Shaila, Shaila Gmin.
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Shaila. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm as Dutch as anyone can be. So first professional, then personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. So I work at this point, at this moment, as a client exec for Atos. Atos is a company of 130,000 people around the world. And what we do, so you all know the Olympics, right? The whole IT behind it is done by Atos.
Oh.
So that's maybe the relationship that you can make. I'm responsible. I'm one of the 80 client execs within the company. So what do? I run the company from a client perspective. From the 80 client executives, only 10% is a woman. So it is kind of a challenge. You're talking about numbers here. We're trying to get up 20%. So we have a lot to do there. A little bit about my background. I used to be the president of PWN Amsterdam since April. And since June, I'm the co-president of PWN Global. Some of you might know the association. It's a worldwide NGO, 30 countries, a couple of thousand members. And what we do is we strive for gender equality in business and society. And I do it together with an Irish lady who's my co-president. We're having lots of fun together, especially with all the different cultures. So from a personal point of view, I'm a techie engineer. So I really like everything that's about technology. Star Trek is my favorite. and Star Wars also. I have 4 children. The oldest is 20 and the youngest is 10. I have 1 daughter. And the conversations that we have at home are quite interesting. Because, as you mentioned, she doesn't understand what's all the fuss about. And so I think we're on a good path here in creating that balance and giving also the right examples in that area. So it's great to be here.
Great. Thank you all. Brief introduction over myself. Some of you, I see a lot of familiar faces, which is wonderful. Mary Jane Roy, Creating Waves is my company. I've been working in Creating Waves since 2011, and basically what I do is in corporations, organizations, creating thriving workspaces, places, people, okay? And a part of that, of course, is equal opportunity. So I have 2 things that I think are kind of buried in my LinkedIn profile. And one is that I've been since 2012 volunteering with an organization called Bridge to Hope. And Bridge to Hope helps women who have been human sex trafficked here in the Netherlands. So please look it up and please give. We do need your help. And the other thing is I'm on the executive board of PWN Amsterdam, and I have been in that role for the last almost 3 years, I believe. So I know Shiloh well from PWN. So that's a little bit about me. Let's start. What can companies do, the bottom line here, what can companies do to stop the leaking pipeline? And I just want to share one quote, and I know it's going against your equal opportunity, which we will all take with you. But Diane Bevelender, some of you will know her from EQUO here, Erasmus University, a quote that she had in an article: "Diversity is inviting you to the party, and inclusion is asking you to dance. I think a lot of us now understand diversity, but we're still missing the boat on inclusion." So, with that in mind, and as the general overall theme for today, the current rate of progress. All right, we've got some global gender gap. This is World Economic Forum, is going to take 108 years to close. I did the math, that's 2126. Economic gender parity, something we should be talking about here too, is going to take 202 years to achieve. That's 2220. I won't be around. So that's the report from the World Economic Forum, end of 2018. Daughters, granddaughters, if you've got them, do the math. When is it going to happen? Huh? So if we look at the current rate, or as I wrote down, the lack of progress in this area, what are your thoughts? I mean, where does it go? Marguerite, let me start with you.
So I'm really, Fleur already mentioned the 30% women on boards, or you should say maybe the 30% women which we've achieved in the meantime almost on a number of non-exec boards. And interestingly, the 30% women on boards, which is also part of the Streefwet in the Netherlands, is still not achieved. And we've been talking about this for a number of years. And I always, when I look at things in my own working environment, you gather the facts, you look at what needs to happen, and at some end, when it doesn't happen, you need to relook at it again, and you need to take the appropriate action. So at the moment, what I see is that the gap, when we talk about parity gap or pay gap, I'll talk about this later as well today. I think there is even a bigger gap at the moment coming up, which is that we consciously know that something is not right. We all know it. Even men know it. It's being something which is being fact-based with data and analytics, etc., and insights around what should happen. And we still allow it not to happen. And the 30% women not on board, for me, is a big thing. Why is it a big thing? Because I think, therefore, also the role models actually are not there. Also not the people who can help the next generation of female leaders in the organizations which are there. And thirdly, I think that it is really time to act on this and to not accept it anymore. So we can still polder on, as we call it in the Netherlands, you all might know, but at some end we really need to make sure that we try to simply say, stop, we should now really act. It should be 30%. And if a quotum is needed, and I think in the meantime it's now really needed, we should make it happen.
Thank you. And Fleur?
I think a quotum is needed because we have been working on this very unsuccessfully for a great number of years, and it simply doesn't go fast enough. So a quotum is needed, and people are a bit, companies are a bit afraid to say it out loud that they want to comply by a quotum, work from a quotum. Because the first question you get is, and what happens if I don't make it? So I've been reading up a bit, and there's basically 2 answers to that. You get either fined, or you appoint a man and you are forced to undo that appointment and find a woman. Well, both are things that big companies don't want. Not from an internal point of view, but most certainly not from a reputation external point of view, because you don't want to hit the newspaper first to appoint a man and then to undo that appointment, because that appointment is not allowed in terms of your 30% quota. So we all need to abide by a quotum. That's the first one. And then the second one is, I think it's very, very important that the senior male leaders that are now in place don't appoint their image, their mirror, the thing that they see in the person that they see in the mirror. And that is something that people often don't even do deliberately. It's very unconscious, but you should be aware that it's very scary sometimes to appoint somebody else than your favorite person that you see every morning in the mirror, but it should be done.
What I'm hearing you're both saying is organizations have to be held accountable. This 30%, if it's out there, they've got to be held accountable. Yeah. Charles, have you got anything to add to this question?
Yeah, because I was always against the quota. And why? Because from my maybe naive way of thinking, I thought I'm very good at my job. I'm a very good engineer, so I will get there based on my qualities, based on my results. But in the last couple of years, I really realized from a personal point of view that it's important to get the quota in. Especially with the company that I'm working now, they're all men. And I'm sorry, guys, but they are gray. They're 45 plus, and they fit the box. So I was thinking, why is it that there are not more women in our management team? And then I realized, it's all about taking risks. Because if you appoint a woman in your board that's not looking like you yourself, and if she's acting in a different way or making different decisions, and she might fail, then you're to blame, right? If it's a man, it's fine, because that can happen. So that was a little bit of the atmosphere that we had in our company, and luckily it's shifting, it's changing. But in order to speed that up, we need that quota. I do agree with that. So it's a cultural shift. It's also a mindset shift. And it's definitely something, as women, and I think we can get to that later, right? Something that we can do something about it as well.
Interesting, because the conversations, either with you, Marguerite, or Fleur this week, I was mentioning the fact that we get so many men move up into leadership positions who are ineffective leaders. And the fear is so great that they're going to put a woman in place who just might not work out. And I'm thinking, where does this come from?
So let me give another example, and people know. So this is really, if you think positive things will happen. So back to the factor of fear. To make an analogy to something completely different. So that the Dutch always play football, or even the ladies are nowadays really good, and we are very bad at missing penalties. We are, and there's been a German survey where actually it was discovered that if you ask people, say to a bunch of boys, okay, make as many penalties as possible out of the 5 you're allowed to take as a team, then they will make at least 3 because they have a positive mindset. If you tell them make as less try to avoid not making goals, so the negative mindset, they actually do score less. Now back to diversity and inclusion, and for me, this is not only diversity and inclusion, but also a talent discussion. If we keep on using the fear factor or the negative mindset of why this should happen, it will never happen. So I'm really in favor of positive mindset. I'm a little bit doubtful all the time why we have to defend ourselves by saying more women make more profitable organizations. Many reports of McKinsey have shown this. I actually think really it's time, to make sure that on the basis of what I call unbiased equality, we're able to get where we need to get. And that means for each and every one of us, whatever background, whatever gender, so an open mindset to opportunity.
Thank you, Marguerite. If I move on, something that I read recently, companies in the top 25% for gender diversity are 15% more likely to outperform their industry peers. So the research also shows that the average employee productivity growth is higher for companies that employ 3 or more women at board level compared to those that have just a single female director or none at all. And what it made me think of, I thought, yeah, great, And then I thought, well, why do we have to make a business case at all for having equal opportunity?
So Fleur, step in if you want to step in, and the same for you. So let me give another fact. So so there is a new tool set by Lean-In, and I really recommend you. If you haven't seen it, it was actually published last week. And it's a set of also did you know. One of the did you knows was that when there is one female director on a board, and I'll come back to performance in a minute, when there's one female director on a board, how many men do you think are really happy with it? Only one out of the 10 board directors are female. How many men are really happy with this? So I'll give you the numbers. 45% of the men think this is extremely well done. One female director out of 10, that's an excellent achievement. But now it gets really interesting. This is where I'm getting at. So if you ask the women, if we would ask here and say they've done this exercise in this survey, 28% of the women also think it's fabulous. Now, of course it's fabulous, but honestly, we need at least 2 or 3. So that's one. I just want to make this point because, but do get to that Lean-In side. It's really interesting. It gives you facts also, which is, it's just, did you know also ourselves? We also need to make sure that we ourselves start really taking action and take the stand. Back to the financial performance, there have been various reports around it, but also back to also quality of leadership. If you don't use the talent which is there, you're actually letting things lay. So I always say, we know what we know, we don't know what we don't know. And if we don't use certain talent knowingly, then we're actually leaving things, we're simply not using the power base and the talent base of an organization as we should.
Frankly, I don't mind that we're making a business case. I work for a company and we make soap and shampoo and peanut butter, and we make business cases all day. Why we need a new fragrance or a new size, or why we will go to Albert Heijn and not to Jumbo. We make business cases all the time to support why we want something. And if that's needed, it's needed, doesn't matter. So for me, the question, why do we make a business case, is totally irrelevant. We simply make it, and then we need to act. And the act part, I think there's a vast amount of awareness that it makes good business sense to have an equal leadership team. So the awareness is there. It's the action that's lacking from time to time, which is not, it's not very difficult to look at your leadership team in terms of numbers and then start looking for a male or a female. In our Benelux leadership team, you can bet that the next appointment will be male, because we need the equality to go the other way around as well. So we won't go to 9 women versus 3 men, because then the equality goes unbalanced the other way around. In our global non-executive board, we're 12 board members, 6 male, 6 female. You simply need to find a woman when you're not 50-50. I must say that the executive team consists of 2 men still, so there's work to do.
Shaila.
Yeah, what I like about your statement is it needs to be the other way around as well. Because if you look at certain areas, especially here in the Netherlands, like, you know, education, health, you know, the balance is gone there as well. You know, look, going to the school of my youngest child, he's going to primary school. There are all women there. And I know that my son would benefit greatly of having a male teacher. You know, so we have to look at different angles there as well. So it's not only, you know, getting the females into the top level, it's also getting the men into, you know, the very important parts that will build our society as well.
Interesting point too. Yeah, there was an article published by HBR a few months ago, and it was ICEDR research. It was the first time I'd heard of this group, and they showed the top 5 reasons why female millennials, and I say both then, quit their jobs. And I'm going to read the 5 top reasons, and then I'm going to ask for feedback. So, I found a job elsewhere that pays more. There aren't enough opportunities for me for growth and development here. The work here is not as interesting and meaningful enough as I would like. There is not a fair balance between how hard I work and the compensation I receive. And we are starting a family, and I'd like to spend more time with them. So if you hear those 5 reasons, which one do you think was the top reason for female millennials? To leave the job.
Is there a number 1?
There is a number 1. Anybody hazard a guess? Opportunity. Actually, I found a job elsewhere that pays more. Okay. Yeah. And the last was the last I read out. Family. So if leaders, this is, I guess what I want to go to now is addressing this idea that women are leaving because they want to start a family. And even though some are doing that, and there are reasons why, and maybe we can address those reasons here as well, some of them that need to be plugged. But if we're going to have a pipeline, obviously keeping your women in place has to take precedence. So what can be done?
Yeah, so I think that there's also an HBR article which is called "Stop Fixing Women, Start Fixing Managers." I was yesterday discussing this with some Dutch colleagues. How do you translate this in proper Dutch? And I couldn't find any good word to do this. But this is a serious thing, because I think that we should, so we've really tried with diversity and inclusion, lots of initiatives around the globe, everywhere, to create awareness, to make things, you know, a little bit more visible. For me, it's now also not only about starting to discuss this with the women, but to start discussing this really knowingly with men. So back to your unconscious bias, Fleur, I really think that this is one of the things which in Aon, we actually are now asking our colleagues, all of them across the globe, to do an unconscious bias training. And this is really interesting because the unconscious bias starts with little things. You know, it starts with, but it also starts with, if you look at how the brain works, part of your brain, if whenever there's a kind of photo, next time I will take it along, and I'm not going to tell you, because if I tell you the secret. But the secret of this photo is actually when you see it, you don't know what it is. But once someone has told you what it is, you'll never ever be able to see that photo again without your bias. So your brain actually is something which makes this happen as well. And back to those unconscious bias trainings, it even goes this far, like just as a simple thing. So it's there was also one of the photos which they show is a Singer sewing machine. And then they ask, where does it come from? This is very simple. Singer is what you think, a German brand. No, Singer, actually the sewing machines come from France. So the funny part is in simple things. So it's not even about men, women, whatever. Also in simple things you actually find out that you're quite easily biased. And the good thing about being aware of whether it's a performance bias or a likability bias or attribution bias, which is the mirror of Fleur at home, you look, you know, the man looking at man, is that if you start to be aware of it, at least you can act on it. And so back to stop fixing the women, start fixing the men, make them aware of that they're really biased from time to time, and so that when they need to take the right decisions, that they have a more open mindset in order to take them. At least, you know, they will need to take their own decisions and be accountable for it. But at least it creates, you know, I think a more thoughtful mindset to make those decisions go in a different direction.
And it's not an overnight fix. It's not a fix that's going to be done by a training, but it has to become part of the culture. Shaila, what kind of things could be done, could be put in place to have some checks on the unconscious bias in the workplace? Have you got some ideas on that? Am I kind of throwing
me
you
on
to the
spot
wolves
there.
here?
So in the afternoon, I will moderate a panel with 3 men. And I think that will be a very interesting one because they will tell us exactly what's happening in the men area. So what can be done? I think calling it out. When I joined the company, the first colleague asked me, "So what are you doing here? HR or marketing?" And I was like, none of that. But you know, so calling it out, make sure that it's that's not only by women, but by men there as well. And having an unconscious bias training is something that's I think it's extremely useful because that will also open up the discussion. What is unconscious bias and what is conscious bias? Okay. And the fact that the word unconscious means that, you know, you're not aware. And having read maybe the book of Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, you know, we all have biases and we need them in order to get through life. But it's the process of getting to know what are your unconscious biases, because I have them as well. Regarding men, regarding other women, get to know them and call them out. And that's the one thing. So especially in the workplace, you know, you need instruments like the unconscious bias training, but also you know, have a very clear conversation about it with your manager, with your colleagues. So I share my story, how I've been confronted with unconscious biases from other people. And for them, they will become aware of the fact that they might do the same. So be open about it. That's what I do.
Yeah, so that you've got feedback loop happening.
Yeah, and make unconscious conscious.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Unconscious conscious.
Anything to add?
We have in the Netherlands now 2 weeks paternity leave for men or partners. And what we see is also the other way around, some bias, that men are a bit reluctant to take those 2 weeks because, I don't know, you name it, they're not considered to be strong, male enough, leader enough, if they want to be 2 weeks with their newborn baby. So you have to be very mindful as well to tick both boxes and to address the struggles that men have as well to be that caretaker or caregiver to their children and not be just the career-focused male that they are brought up to be. And perhaps in the next generation and in our children and in the millennial generation, that's a bit less. But we see in our generation still that there's some difficulty. So we have to be conscious of that as well.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please do.
So I'll tell you a personal story. So my husband already mentioned is a pilot. And in my role, and I've been managing EMEA and Asia Pacific, and I was traveling more than he did in those days. I flew across the whole globe, so I made more flying hours than my husband. But the story I'm trying to tell here is I have 2 children too, Shaila, and so what's really interesting is that my husband, you know, when he's not flying, and at some end he actually started flying part-time so that we could balance our lives better together and with the kids. And I work full-time, so we made decisions together. And he was the one always doing the leases at school. Remember those lease mothers? You might know that. So my husband always did this. And back to group thinking, I'm going to raise 2 things. So one is, you know, when he showed up at school, of course, he didn't have his uniform on, which is very impressive, but he was only wearing... So some of the moms thought he was unemployed. And of course, when he showed up at one day with his uniform because he had to go flying afterwards, suddenly it was, but it's just back to groupthink. I want to raise this as well, groupthink. I think this is really important. There's been an experiment, Salomon Asch, it's 1951 experience, a video about groupthink. And what does it show? This video actually shows, you know, one person sitting here, just imagine the 4 of us. I'm the one naive person sitting there, and they actually show pictures. And they asked me they ask each and every one of us to tell what's the picture. So Mary Jane starts and says, it's a cow. Shaila says it's a cow. I know it's a horse, so I said horse. The first time I say horse. The second, and here we go, Fleur says a cow too. So I'm sitting here like, okay, the next picture is coming up. I know it's a fish, but Mary Jane says it's a goat. It's a goat. And then I'm saying, it's a goat. So back to groupthink, and this is really important. I want to call this out to each and every one of you. Don't fall in this trap when you're on boards or when you're sitting somewhere, back to the overall discussion, because it's something you definitely have an influence yourself. Be yourself and, also stand up for yourself. And back to women, and that's why I think it's important to have more than one woman on boards to really make it tangible and to have leadership role models at executive levels in organizations. This is exactly what I think is one of the things we sometimes oversee, the groupthink of men and women also, so all of us, is really something which we should keep in mind as well, next to unconscious bias.
Yeah, and they need role models too, don't they? Leadership role models, the leaders who take the paternity leave and show that this is an important part of their life as well. And if that happens, men will be more willing, I think, to step up. There was Ernst Young in 2000. I've got it here somewhere. 2016. So they started giving new dads the same amount of paid parental leave as the new mums. And this was also for whether or not it was adopting, birth, surrogacy, foster care, or legal guardianship. So the men started getting it. It dropped the rate of women leaving by 15%. Okay? So it can have a very powerful impact. And I don't know that they're doing that here in the Netherlands,
but Mary Jane,
honestly. This is the US.
Yeah, so you're sitting here in the Dutch environment, and we've been known for our Calvinistic approach for since centuries. Don't want to call the golden age again. But the point is, this is really something which is really important. So back to culture and behavior, and back also to the world we actually have created here, and back to your picture of the male leaders. It's also, being able to stand up as a woman and also to be different. Back to research, back to one comment for you on the research, which is about, there've been a research around how many men or how many women are actually thinking about leaving a firm to work for their families. And we think, it's our bias, that we think that women are more keen to think about this. But actually, if you ask millennials, there's been an exercise, only 2% of both men and women think about this. So it's both men and women the same. And so also we need to be very careful not to create our own biases around these kind of topics.
Yeah. Shaila, anything to add on that?
I'm totally in agreement.
Yeah. Aegon, Nederland. I heard this last year, and I wrote to somebody, and she got me the legal statement I could read out here, all right? So, has explicitly integrated gender pay equality in its common labor agreement. And Aegon has actively researched in its Dutch companies whether currently gender pay inequality exists and found it does not. It's the only company, I believe, in the Netherlands that has this as a stated policy, if I'm not mistaken. But how can we make this the norm? And Fleur, I'm going to pass to you because you mentioned in your presentation you really want to say something about gender pay parity.
Every year we do a full organizational scan as to do male people at a certain level get the equal amount of money as female people do. So far it's okay, but we believe it's okay because, and there's no gap, but we believe that it's true and there's no gap because we do it every year, consciously, deliberately, every year again. So if we appoint people, we know that the scan will come. So up forehand, we will absolutely make sure that there will be no gap. Because I think if you as a company say that you want to strive for equality, and on the backside, you're not even willing to pay women the same amount of money, then you have a lot of homework to do. So I think it's not even. I mean, of course, it's very important to talk about, and on the other hand, it's not even a topic worth talking about, because it should be. If the pay isn't equal, then the whole discussion we're having here these 2 days about getting an equal amount of women in senior leadership positions is not a discussion that we can have before the pay is equal.
So, in your eyes, it is the
and there's a
absolute
lot of research.
bottom line requirement.
Yeah,
kind
and there's a
thing.
lot of external research done as well. And I applaud Egon for really writing it down. It's something that we might even steal from them. Would be good. But there's a lot of external research and benchmarking done as well.
So I applaud them too. I think that this is one of the items we see a lot of in the press recently again, of troostmeisjes in Japan. I'm sometimes really worried. So I'm in insurance, as you know. So this is one of the risks, which I think there is really an imminent risk for employers if they don't act on this now. And what do I mean? Employers are liable, as you all know, for actions if they've done negative disadvantage situations. I'm actually really afraid that we'll see in the future, women standing up, acting against their employers for actually disadvantaged behavior. So this is something where employers, in my opinion, simply need to act. But also, you can act yourself if you feel there's a disparity in the pay. Then raise it. I've raised it in my firm, to be quite honest. And they were, of course, really like what's going on. I said I want a benchmark, and I did it very gently because sometimes also it can cause quite some friction. But you need to be business-wise for yourself and just raise it and ask for it and say, can HR do a benchmark? Or even better, I called HR first and said, would you be? And of course they say yes, because HR is very afraid something
Champion.
bad will happen. And then I went to my boss. So there's also, this is what I call ways to get this done in a manner which doesn't really frustrate a lot of people around you, because sometimes it can also be really disruptive if you go this way. But you need to do it.
You need to do it, and don't be modest. Because women often are a bit afraid, and I'm generalizing now, I realize, but don't be afraid to really address the point if you think that you are not equally paid compared to your male colleagues. And you much too often see women thinking, well, let's prove myself first and then I ask for the pay. In the heads of males, it's the other way around. I want the pay and then I'm paid for doing my utmost, and I will give you the quality.
Yeah, and Charla, you saw we've got the
we have
sign.
1 minute.
We have 1 minute, so if you
just-
could
I
wrap
will keep
this
it-
up.
So I started at this company and I knew that there was a gap. So I went to my boss and I said, you know what? I'm the president of PWN Global. I want fairness. So if I find out that there is a gap in 1 month still, then you have a huge problem. So I want fairness. And he was like, but do you think that there's a gap? I said, I know there is a gap. And he said, yeah, let me see how I can fix it. So, he's in the process. I have to make sure that he keeps his word. But the point is, what I want to make is that, ask for fairness. It's just fairness. That's
Opportunity.
equal opportunity. It's fairness. So I said to my colleagues, I just want fair. I want just fair pay. And calling it out like that also creates an opportunity to have that conversation. And benchmarking it, of course, with HR is a way to make sure that, they can't go around you. They have to deal with the fact that there is, in my company, still inequality also regarding pay. So call it out.
So I want to, with this, close this part of the panel discussion. Poonam is going to take over, and there's going to be a chance now for you all to be asking questions of the panelists. Thank you. Really, thank you. And I really appreciate the new insights that you've brought here to the discussion.
Great.